Well, I don't know what happened there. I think my computer threw a bit of a wobbler. Went into the old blue screen of death. Like I say, I usually do live streams on Facebook using the big PC up in the studio instead of this little laptop. I forgot one of the foibles of this laptop is that it occasionally just throws a blue screen, and that kicked me off the live stream. So, as I was saying before, I was so rudely interrupted while I was waiting for the computer to reboot. Just finished off the edge on this side. I'll work around the other side now. As I was saying before, I was so rudely interrupted. Thank you for rejoining, people who are rejoining. Yeah, a couple of people I probably need to mention who kind of live in the Plectraverse. One is John Tron Davidson, who I interviewed for the channel earlier this year, and he talked a lot about basically why picks are important, and what you need to think about when you're moving beyond just the Dunlop Tortex or celluloid or nylon picks, and moving into the more boutique end of the market, things like this. So it's very enlightening talking to him to kind of help me to reassess my relationship with picks. I'd experimented with a few different types and materials, but talking to John, it kind of made me think a bit more about what was out there, and certainly helped me on my journey through the Plectraverse. Obviously quite a way, because I've been inspired to make my own picks. The whole making picks thing, I think I need to say a big thank you to Arcanum Plectra, who's I think based in a similar part of the world to John Davidson, actually down the southwest. But because I got into picks, I was following different people online on Instagram and whatnot. And one night I just happened to be sitting, and Arcanum Plectra announced that they were doing a live stream. So I thought, that could be fun. I'll just go and watch that. And it was this sort of thing. It was just him sitting with a file and a pick, and just putting the edge on it, and just having a bit of general chat, and playing some music in the background from his playlist on Spotify, and just generally chatting. That sort of made me see inside the pick making process, and I thought, yeah, I can see what's going on there. I'm tempted to have a bit of a go myself. Did a little bit of research into materials, found out you can buy this Kironite stuff from various places. So I got a couple of pieces and started making some prototypes, and found the whole thing very rewarding. Because there's picks I've played, and I like a pick because of its weight, but it hasn't got quite the right shape for me, or I get something that's the right sort of right, but I just need something a little bit smaller, a different sort of size. So when I got into custom making my own picks, I could look at things that I liked in terms of shapes and size, and like tip profile and whatever, and kind of fashion something that was to my own taste, which is nice. And it's quite satisfying having something material to show for spending time doing something. Playing guitar is great in terms of the whole creative process. I'm quite a creative person. I like making music. I like making things. I do photography. I cook. All the sorts of things I do are creative things. But this is quite nice in that I have a material thing at the end of it, kind of to show for my efforts. Although now I have a lot of material things to show for my efforts, so I'm passing them on through the Fatfish Picks shop. So like this one will be going to Joey over in I think he's over in Ohio, certainly somewhere in the States. Yeah, I think it's Ohio. Okay, so we've got an edge on there. It's a little bit softer on the top, and a little bit more angular on the playing edge. So I was putting that on with quite a coarse file, and there's a few places there where there's definitely file marks. So what I'm going to do is put that file to one side and start with something a little bit finer cut on it, and basically just go around the edges, make another pass around, and this hopefully will start to smooth things out a little bit. The actual smoothing process all happens with sandpaper or wet and dry paper, emery paper, whatever. but certainly filing is essential for getting a good, reasonably smooth edge to work with, getting rid of any coarse file marks from the working process. So I'm keeping the pick fairly angular on the picking edge, where it's going to be like a hard bevel for playing with. When I get around the top edge, like I said, this is more for comfort, so I can pass over that with more of an angular motion to have a slightly more rounded bevel there. Because in terms of options on the picks, I offer a hard bevel, a soft bevel, or rounded. So the hard bevel is pretty much a 45-degree angle from the flat surface of the pick off to the edge. Rounded is still a noticeable bevel there, but it's a little bit more rounded over. It's a softer bevel, a little bit smoother, a little bit more organic. And then there's the option of rounded, which is basically no real discernible edge. It just falls away very much at a very rounded sort of angle. Best analogy I can give it, it's a bit like a sucked sweetie. You know, it's a very smooth, very organic sort of edge. No particular edge is the right way to make a pick. It's all personal preference. That's why if you go to the shop, I've got quite a few picks with different options. So if you can look at a small standard or a large standard like this, there'll be the different tip shapes, different tip profiles, and the different edges. So I mentioned there about the edges. The tips, generally there's sort of three. There's the sharp tip, like this, which is pretty sharp. I'm going to that'll soften that off ever so slightly, because I'm finessing the pick. But generally, the tip, the sharp tip, is pretty sharp. Like I say, it's also all about very precise picking. The semi-sharp is softened off a little bit, but there's still a pronounced point. And then there's the round, which is a much smoother, rounded off, softer sort of tone on the strings. Again, no right or wrong option. Certain shapes, certain sizes suit certain people, certain playing styles more than others. Okay, so back onto the playing edge. So hard bevel there. So keeping the pick at a fairly steep angle. Well, 45-degree angle, but I'm not rounding over. Let's get to the top. I kind of do something a little bit more organic and round that over. So just make sure that the tip is on center. It's not. I just need to even that up a little bit. And it's important doing this not to over concentrate on one area, because you'll end up with like a flat spot or an area where it's not smooth. There'll be certain parts where you can see it's been worked more than others. So if there's an area I need to work on like this, I'll work on it, but then kind of smooth it into the rest of the pick, so there's not like a flat spot where I've been working. And again on the other side. So I'm trying to see how long I've been going on here. So the stream has been going on for about 8 minutes or so. I think that first stream before it crashed, I think it was on for about half an hour. But I chatted a bit at the start, didn't I? So there's probably about 25 minutes or so on that other stream of actual work. So there's, getting on for over half an hour's working time. And I'm only just starting to put the playing edge on the pick. So you can see what I mean when I'm talking about it's a bit of a labor-intensive process, but it's quite therapeutic. I enjoy doing it. If it's been a busy day, it's actually quite nice. It's like mindfulness, isn't it? You just kind of sit with a piece of plastic and a file and some sandpaper and just fashion a thing, and just kind of zone out, catch up on podcast listening, or just listen to good music, or come on a live stream and talk to you good people. So as I said before, I got inspired to get into making picks by, I guess the thing that kind of pushed me over the edge into actually doing this is watching that live stream from Arcane and Plectra. And the first picks I did, I bought some Kieranite, and we just worked really with what tools I had in the shed already. So that's why I've got that. I was using that big coarse file, using that coping saw I already had for, I've used it for a little DIY project. Had plenty sandpaper. If you follow the channel, you'll know that I built a guitar, like a parts caster, a few years ago. So I've got a reasonable set of tools that I used from when I was making that. So plenty sandpaper and so on. So I didn't actually have any real outlay other than for the material itself. Okay, so how's this looking? This is looking quite good. Edge is now a lot smoother. No really obvious file marks on it. That tip is super sharp, so I'm going to dress that off ever so slightly. It's going to be a sharp tip, so I'm just going to pass over that ever so slightly, very light touch, just to get the really sharp point off it. We want something that's going to be sharp and have good contact with the strings. We don't want something that's going to be an offensive weapon. But what we do want is the two sides kind of meeting at a very fine point. We don't want them kind of meeting at a point and having like a fat top to it. So just making sure we're filed over the edge there. I haven't kind of fattened the tip off. If I have, I'll just dress that ever so slightly with the file, and I can finesse that with sandpaper as we go on. Okay, I'm reasonably happy with that. What I'm going to do, put that to one side. I'm just going to get rid of this dust into the bin. That's why I work on a board, because it's easier to just take all this dust away, chuck it in the bin. Okay, sandpaper next. I'm just going to go over it with, I'll go through the grit. So I'll start off with 240 grit. This is just a tiny little scrap, but it fits in around my thumb quite nicely. So I'm just going to put that on my thumb, basically using my thumb as a tool, and go around and just smooth around the edges. I'm going to put a slightly harder, use the sandpaper flat, sheet of sandpaper flat on the bench in a second to kind of accentuate the bevel, because I need a hard edge on this. So it's the spec that I'm working to. I can do a softer sort of sand around the top where it needs to be a little bit more organic. So in terms of making a pick, there's sort of 3 or 4, say 4 stages. First one you didn't see is basically marking out the basic shape and cutting it. So I use a coping saw for that. Next stage, which you've seen, is shaping it down, getting the shape, and then putting the bevels on. That's all done with the file. Stage 3 is sandpaper work, or sandpaper, or like abrasive paper. So I'll be doing some work with some wet and dry paper as well. And then the final stage is putting the polish onto it. That's where the finish really shows, like the ones I was showing you at the start of the first stream before we got cut off. They look very pretty, quite jewel-like. That's where the polish really helps. It really brings out the pattern and makes them look pretty. And I'll kind of show you the process for that, because there's a few different options for material. Also for substances that you can use for putting the polish on. Now, what happens when I go around with sandpaper like this is it creates nice fine dust. And what that fine dust does is, if there's any marks left behind by the file from the filing process. The dust kind of goes into there and shows the marks up. So the real trick is to find any marks and scratches and blemishes early on, rather than going through to the final polish and realizing you've missed a bit and then having to kind of take everything back. So yeah, there's another one just there, which I'm going to have to work a little bit harder with the sandpaper. And again, don't want to over concentrate on one area because I'll end up with a flat spot. But I need to work the sandpaper enough to get through where that scratch is and get down to the level. So yeah, that's rid of that. And finish off around here. Okay, so that's 240 grit. And because I want a hard bevel on this, put that to one side. This is a pile of loads of different sheets of sandpaper. I'm going to be doing like going through the grit. So this is 240. This is the only one I use, which is actually sandpaper. What I'm going to do is just basically put the pick on there at 45 degrees and just work it, smoothing it into the tip to get a hard beveled edge onto it. As you go through the grits, some grits are coarse and they're more about shaping. Other ones a little bit smoother, they're more about polishing. 240 being the coarsest is very much about shaping, smooth shaping of the pick. Okay, I'm happy with that. I'm going to do the edges first, and then I'll come on and I'll do the pick face. So next up is, again, this is a little scrap, but it fits nicely in my hand. So this is 600 grit. This, as you can see, it's darker. This isn't sandpaper. This is actually wet and dry paper. But I can use this dry, and it does basically the same job as sandpaper. And the way I'm holding it, being careful when I'm working on the playing edge, not to soften the bevel too much. On the top here, hands getting in the way. Top here I can smooth over a little bit, but on the playing edge, I try to keep the bevel nice and hard, because that's what the customer wants. The customer wants a hard bevel edge and sharp tip profile. So we can do that. And again, while I'm doing this, just keeping my eye open for any white marks that might be telltale signs of dust getting into scratches or file marks that are going to spoil the edge. To be honest, those scratches are so small, they don't affect the playing experience. But if you've got dark material like this, the scratches just show up and they look horrible, and it offends my eyes. You're paying a lot of money for a pick like this. Like I said, this time and effort goes into them, but that's no excuse for not spending a little bit of extra time and a little bit of extra effort to make them look really, really good. Aha, I have a comment. Joey, this is your pick. You're seeing a work in progress. Joey, I'm playing using one of your picks right now. Good man. I've never used such a thick pick. Yeah, few of my customers have said that. The difference it's made for me is surprisingly substantial. Very good and inspiring work. That's what I want to hear. I find I'm becoming increasingly, what's the word? Evangelistic, if that's the word. Trying to convince people that playing with something a bit thicker, yeah, it's a bit of a strange experience. It's probably an order of magnitude bigger pick than anything you've used before, but it's worth persevering with because you get a better playing experience, and it will inspire you to play and do things that you might not otherwise have done with the guitar. Okay, so going around there with 600 grit. Next bit of paper, I need a piece of 1200. Again, I'm just working with tiny little scraps, which looks really poor and unprofessional, but actually quite comfortable. 1200, 1200, haha. So we'll go through. Once we get up to 1200 grit, this is more about putting a polish on. 240, 600 grit, there's enough coarseness there. You know, this obviously the smoothing the playing surface out, but they're smoothing it as much as shaping it as much as they're smoothing it. Once we get to 1200 grit, this is really getting quite fine, and it's taking some material off, but as much as anything, it's just taking tiny bits of material just to get it to a nice smooth. Like, well, the camera's picking that up, but it has got a bit of a polish to it now, and there's still a couple of grits to go. I was talking to a friend of mine the other day. He's been doing some woodworking. He knew that I've been making picks, and he'd been doing some woodworking and finishing something off using like wood fill. I think he was fixing that was it. He was fixing a rotten window frame. He put some filler into it. Okay, 1500 grit now, and he was asking what grits I was using, and for him, 240, that was pretty fine for doing finishing on. Really is just kind of starting off for me when you want to get a nice smooth finish on a pick like this. I'm going to be going up to 2000, so I'm on 1500 grit now. This is the second finest finish that gritted paper that I'll use, and then I'll go to 2000. Similar thing on the face of the pick, and then once that's done, we can go in with the final polish. Okay, that's looking good again. Just keep checking, make sure there's no marks, no blemishes, no marks from the file. So lastly, tiny little piece, but it fits my thumb really nicely, of 2000 grit. So this is polishing. Really, it's just putting that final smoothness on. Not putting too much pressure on with my thumb. Need enough pressure to get the paper to make contact with the pick. And actually kind of cut into the plastic a bit. But I don't want to be pushing on so much that we end up with flat spots or anything like that. And I'll have one last pass around the tip. It still feels kind of sharp. I think I might need to just kind of sand that down. Yeah, I'm going to just sand a little bit off. Yeah, that's fine, just enough there. And I'll probably go to 600 just to kind of put the playing edge back onto that. There's a little bit of reworking here, but not too much. And probably get away with just going to 1500 there. So we're now about 23 minutes in, plus probably about 25 minutes on the original stream. No, there's a mark there. I need to dress that out. So yeah, so we're probably at about the 45 minutes of working just on this pick so far. So like I was saying, it's a bit of a time-consuming process. So that gives you a metric that I'm just finishing the playing edge now. I've still got the surface that we hold to do, and I've got the final polish. So this is probably going to be coming in at about an hour of working time. Actually more, because we kind of jumped straight into me doing the finishing on this. Where's my 2000 grit gone? The problem with having such a small piece of paper is I lose it so easily. Slightly bigger paper, that'll do. What we didn't do is the actual marking and cutting out the material. So pretty well north of an hour in terms of time spent on this particular pick. But it's all good. It's an artisan boutique piece. It's not some mass-produced thing. Okay, so last thing I mentioned is the tip profile. So we've got a sharp tip on this pick. So that's what Joey was after. It's also got what we call hard tip profile. So the edge comes up here, the edge comes up here, and there's a definite like dividing line between the two. I also do one with a like a smooth sort of profile, which is completely rounded over, so there's just a natural transition from one side to the other. And then there's a semi-hard tip profile, which is kind of apart. It's got a distinct difference between the two sides, but it's not as pronounced as on this. But that's the playing edge done. What I want to do now is get the front and back. As you can probably see on the camera, there's some marks there from where the raw material was cut. So what I'm going to do here is just get that flat on the 240 grit and just basically work that, trying not to take the ends off my fingers. When I first started practicing with making picks, I realized I was holding the piece slightly wrong when I was doing this, and I ended up with one fingernail. I basically sanded it off in the course of a day. So you live and learn. But life's all about making mistakes and learning from them. So random sort of swirls. Don't want anything too uniform because that will leave marks which are harder to get rid of. So again, we're just working through the grit. So that's 240. Next, 600 grit. So this is just a pass going around, smoothing out what we've got on the playing surface, because we want to get that nice and flat, nice and smooth, so we can get that polished up and looking pretty. How the pick, oh, there's a piece of sandpaper I was looking for. You know, how the pick looks shouldn't matter. It's just cosmetic. But if something looks nice, and this applies whether it's a pick or whether it's guitar or anything, if it looks nice, it'll inspire you and you'll want to use it, you'll want to play it. And it's all part of the creative process. You know, as a guitar teacher, you know, often have parents coming saying they want to buy a guitar for the kid. What sort of guitar do they want? And they might be looking at something that the kid just doesn't like the look of. And I say, you know, you need to bear in mind what that guitar looks like, because if it looks like the sort of guitar that the child or the kids guitar heroes play, then he'll be or she will be inspired to pick the guitar up and play it. If it looks like something that their parents are fans of, they might not feel so inclined to pick it up. So yeah, how something looks is part of the artistic process. Okay, so that's all sanded off now. I'm covered in dust. What I'm going to do is get on the next stage, which is polishing. So to do that, I'm just going to grab a cloth. So next stage is the ubiquitous yellow duster. Now there's a few different things we can use for polishing picks. Today I'm going to be using Halford's rubbing compound. I was using Silvo, which is like a liquid. What this is basically is an abrasive polish. It's a very fine powder that we're going to rub onto the face of the pick, and it'll bring the polish up. And I was using Silvo, which is like a liquid, like almost like quite watery. And I like that because it's not runny. So it's not smelly. It's like I say, it's quite watery. But it doesn't smell. Brasso does the job just as well. It's from the same people, but Brasso smells. It's like a petroleum solvent sort of base, which I don't like the smell of. It's very similar to T-Cut, which also does the job very well, but I hate the smell of those because they're solvent based and just gives me a headache. Silvo, I find, works really, really well, but I ran out of that. So I was looking for what else I had to hand, and I had this rubbing compound. So this is designed for cars. If we're repairing like body, like finishing bodywork when you've been doing repairs on it. It looks like toothpaste, and it kind of made me think, I wonder if I could get away with, go to the pound shop and just buy some cheap toothpaste, which has got a similar sort of abrasive quality, and rather than having a smell of polish. I mean, this Halford's stuff's not too bad a smell, but I thought I'd use toothpaste and like a nice minty smell for what I'm doing. There you go. So a few passes there. I've not been doing a whole lot of polishing there, but that now is really shiny and looking really, really pretty. So a little bit more onto the cloth, just a tiny amount, and polish up the playing edge. Now the playing edge, some people actually like this left unpolished, so just like done with fine sandpaper, and you're left with kind of a matte, satiny sort of finish that actually chirps slightly off the strings. Some people like that. Personally, I don't. I much prefer a highly polished edge, something that's going to glide off the strings nice and smooth. So this is all elbow grease. This is the kind of like the last mile, and it's quite rewarding. I like the way it's a bit like varnishing a piece of wood or oiling a piece of wood. If you're doing woodworking and the grain kind of pops through and it just starts to look all pretty and gorgeous. This final pass through, put in an hour's work or whatever, an hour plus, shaping the pick, cutting it, filing it, sanding it. But that last 5 minutes or so, just going around it with a cloth and some polish, just making it nice and shiny and lovely. That for me is kind of where the real reward is. So move on to the other side. A little bit too much on the cloth there. Never mind. So as you can see, all a manual process. This is why this takes time. I'm not using a polishing wheel on a Dremel or putting this onto a machine or anything to polish. It's all done by hand. It takes time, but like I say, it's rewarding. And for doing it, it's quite therapeutic. It's quite nice to just sit and do this. It's quite mindful and kind of chat on to you guys, while I'm talking to you live on the stream, in which case, thank you very much for joining me. Or if it's a case of I'm talking to somebody who's joining me on the replay, in which case, thank you for joining me on the replay. So nearly that. Start at the top edge now. So I'm putting the finish on now. What I'll probably do, what I tend to do with these picks is they'll, if they're going into stock, they get put into individual little bags and are organised and sorted. But what I'll do before I finally dispatch them is just give them a final polish through with these, just to get rid of any scratches that the picks might have picked up while they were in storage. Okay, so I think that's just about done. Final look at it. Yeah, nice and uniform. No marks, no flat edges. Okay, a little bit of dust on it. I'm just going to take this off. I've got a bowl of water in the background here. Rinse that off, get rid of the dust. Ta-da! So there you go, Joey. This one and another, which I'll be working on. It's getting a bit late here tonight, so I'll probably be working on that one tomorrow. This is your purple large standard pick. Sharp tip, hard bevel edge, and a hard tip profile in Acid Storm purple. I'll be doing you another one of those tomorrow and getting that in the post. Anybody watching, if you've enjoyed this and you think, oh, these look interesting, I wouldn't mind getting one of those picks for myself, get yourself over to the Fatfish Picks store on Etsy. If you can't find anything there that you really want, get in touch with me through the Fatfish Picks website, and I can get it. I can do custom orders. If there's either a variation on a stock item that you're interested in, or like I did with Pat Buzzard that I was talking about earlier, he came with a shape that he wanted that I didn't already do. These things are all handmade, so I can adapt to come up with something that works for you and gives you whatever you want. And if there's a particular color, like I say, some of the ones I was showing you tonight, let's go and grab some of these in case anybody's joining the stream but wasn't on earlier. We've got a variety of colors. Let's put Joey's over there, nice and safe. So we've got green, red, blue, there's gold, this nice orange one, the glow in the dark. So put the raw material for that. Stocks are quite low at the minute, but loads of different colors, shapes, sizes, and variations. But that's it. The important, what tonight's been all about has been about this one for Joey, who says, "Looks gorgeous, Dave. You're excited. I'm glad you're excited. I'm excited that you're excited. I enjoy making these. I'm a little bit hacked off that the USPS lost the original ones, but to be honest, the ones that lost the carbon black, the purple's prettier. I think you're actually getting a better deal here." Okay, so thanks very much to everyone who joined me. I apologize for the first stream going offline. Thanks, just my laptop was being awkward. But thanks for joining me. I do these streams occasionally, usually on Facebook. I tend to do live streams generally on a Saturday night, playing guitar, talking about guitar and music theory or guitar technique or whatever. This was a little bit different. I thought I'd come on, and because I had some picks to make, I thought I'd just talk a little bit about the process. So hope you found that interesting. As ever, if you've got any comments or anything, leave them in the comment section down there. I don't always see comments. YouTube's rubbish at letting me know when people have commented on videos. So generally, I ask people to kind of message me, but I'll keep an eye on the comment section here. So if anybody's got anything that they want to ask me about picks, Global Switch 17's just joined the stream. How much for a pick? How much for a pick? That's a good question. This one in front of me here, Mr. Chapman, who's also in the comment section there. This would retail probably about pounds. I'm in the UK, so I'm pricing in Great British pounds. Basically based on size. This one's a little bit bigger than something like this, which is a small standard. These go for about £7 each. Basically, you think that's an awful lot of money for a pick, but like I was saying in the start of the first stream, there's a lot of effort goes in. This pick, I made it in real time tonight, plus the cutting out time and whatever ahead of that. There's an hour plus. Something like this one in Orange Sunburst, a little bit more finishing on the edge, but I've drilled grip holes in that. Those probably go for about £8. Something like this is, I'll just quickly flip the lights. It glows in the dark. And that material is a bit more expensive. So that one's probably going to be going onto the Etsy store for about £10. Seeing as you're just joining, I'll show you this. A lot like a shield pick. These ones are about £7 as well. This is dictated a little bit about based on how much the actual material costs and how much I get that from my suppliers for. I basically buy it as sheets. So this is the sheet that Joey's large standard was cut from. So I buy that and cut it and shape it. So there's a bit of time and effort goes in. That's kind of where the price comes in, because time is money. To be honest, though, I'm just starting off with the pick business. I've been a guitar teacher for years. I've had an online presence for years doing guitar lessons and whatnot. The pick thing is kind of a new venture, so I'm pricing a little bit low at the minute. I think once the name kind of gets established, prices will probably go up a little bit. So if you want to jump in now, get yourself over to the Fat Fish Picks store on Etsy. Grab yourself a bargain. Like I say, if there's nothing there that you're particularly taken with, get in touch with me through the website. And if you want to try a bite to eat and possibly a fermented beverage, because the sun is well past the yard arm. Thanks everybody for joining me on the live stream tonight. If you're joining me on the replay, thank you very much for joining me on the replay. Love you all. Thanks for joining me, and I'll see you next time. Bye, folks.